Jasmine and Maya Washington stare in disbelief as flight attendant Cynthia demands they leave first class despite valid tickets. Maya's hands shake filming the confrontation on her phone. Jasmine whispers, "Call Dad." The sisters don't know their call will shut down an entire airline by midnight. Before we dive deeper into this shocking story, where are you watching from today? Hit that like button if you've ever experienced discrimination while traveling, and subscribe to join our community fighting for justice. Now let's see what happened after these sisters made that fateful call. SkyNation Airlines Flight 2187 sat on the tarmac at Boston Logan International Airport, preparing for its 5-hour journey to Los Angeles. Among the passengers settling into the plush leather seats of first class were sisters Jasmine and Maya Washington, their faces bright with anticipation despite the early morning departure. At 24, Jasmine carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had already proven herself in a world that constantly questioned her right to be there. A recent MBA graduate from Howard University with honors, she had secured an interview with a prestigious tech consulting firm in Los Angeles. Her tailored navy blazer and simple gold jewelry spoke of understated elegance and professionalism. Maya, 3 years younger at 21, practically vibrated with excitement beside her sister. A computer science prodigy who had graduated early from Howard with multiple job offers already in hand, Maya was flying out to interview with 3 major tech companies who were competing for her innovative approach to AI programming. Where Jasmine was reserved, Maya was expressive, her braided hair adorned with subtle golden cuffs, her fingers constantly moving as if writing code in the air. "Can you believe we're finally doing this?" Maya whispered, running her hand over the spacious armrest. "First class all the way to LA." Jasmine smiled, taking in the champagne being offered to passengers, the extra legroom, and the premium amenities. "We earned this. We've been saving up for months to make sure we arrive refreshed for these interviews." The sisters had meticulously planned this trip, spending extra on first-class tickets to ensure they would arrive in peak condition for the interviews that could define their careers. Growing up with successful parents had taught them the importance of presentation, especially as young black women in predominantly white industries. As they settled in, a flight attendant approached their row. Her name tag read, Cynthia Thompson, and her smile seemed to freeze when she saw the Washington sisters. "Tickets, please," Cynthia said, her tone noticeably cooler than the cheerful greeting she had offered to the elderly white couple across the aisle. Jasmine presented both boarding passes on her phone. "Seats 2A and 2B, she said politely. Cynthia scrutinized the digital tickets with narrowed eyes, as if searching for a discrepancy. "These are first-class seats," she stated, not as a confirmation but almost as an accusation. "Yes," Maya replied. "That's why we're sitting in first class." With a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes, Cynthia moved on, but the sisters noticed her return several times to their row, checking their tickets again, asking if they needed assistance with obvious reluctance, while warmly attending to other passengers. "Is she for real?" Maya muttered under her breath as Cynthia fussed over the seat settings for a white businessman in the row ahead, having just curtly handed the sisters their beverages without a word. "Ignore it," Jasmine advised quietly. "We're here to get to LA in good shape for our interviews, not to get into it with flight staff." As boarding continued, the sisters observed the other passengers in first class. Out of 16 seats, they were the only black passengers in the premium cabin. Maya discreetly pointed out that the few other black passengers she had seen were all being directed to economy class, where a quick glance showed a much more diverse group than the almost exclusively white first-class section. The pattern became impossible to ignore. White passengers were welcomed with warm smiles, offered immediate assistance with their luggage, and addressed by honorifics. In contrast, Cynthia had checked the Washington sisters' tickets 3 separate times before takeoff, as if she couldn't believe they belonged in first class. "Remember what Mom always says," Jasmine murmured to her sister as they noticed Cynthia watching them while whispering to another flight attendant. "Document everything, but choose your battles." Maya nodded, but her hand instinctively moved to her phone, ready to record if needed. Both sisters had learned from their parents that preparation wasn't just about having the right credentials, it was about being ready to defend your right to the space you had rightfully earned. Little did they know how important that lesson would prove in the next few hours. The seatbelt sign had just been turned off when Cynthia reappeared at their row, this time accompanied by a male flight attendant whose name tag read Kevin. The plane had reached cruising altitude, and most passengers were settling in with their complimentary headphones and tablets. "Excuse me, ladies," Cynthia said, her voice carrying just enough to draw attention from nearby passengers. "We've received complaints that you're being disruptive." Jasmine looked up from her tablet where she had been quietly reviewing presentation notes. Maya removed her headphones, pausing the meditation app she was using to calm her pre-interview nerves. "Disruptive?" Jasmine repeated, keeping her voice measured despite the absurdity of the claim. "We've been sitting here working silently since takeoff." The reality was exactly as Jasmine stated. The sisters had exchanged a few whispered comments about their upcoming interviews before settling into their individual preparations. Maya had been listening to her meditation app with headphones, while Jasmine reviewed her notes without making a sound. What the sisters couldn't see was what had transpired 3 rows behind them. Bradley and Karen Mitchell, a wealthy couple in their 60s, had been shooting uncomfortable glances at the Washington sisters since boarding. When Cynthia had come through with the beverage service, Karen had signaled her closer. "Are those two supposed to be in first class?" Karen had whispered loudly enough for her husband to hear but not carry to the sisters. "They don't seem like they belong here." Bradley had nodded in agreement. "Probably got upgraded with points or something. They're making me uncomfortable, constantly whispering to each other. Probably talking about us." Cynthia had assured them she would handle the situation, validating their unfounded complaints without question. Now, facing the sisters, Kevin stepped forward with what he clearly thought was a reasonable offer. "We have some nice economy plus seats available where you might be more comfortable." "More comfortable than the first-class seats we paid for?" Maya asked, her voice rising slightly with indignation. She reached for her phone and began recording. "Why would we be more comfortable in lesser seats?" "Please put your phone away," Cynthia demanded immediately. "Recording crew members is against airline policy." "Actually," Maya countered, her knowledge of tech extending to digital rights, federal regulations permit recording if there's no interference with crew duties. "I'm documenting this interaction because something doesn't feel right about it." Jasmine placed a calming hand on her sister's arm while addressing the flight attendants directly. "We purchased these tickets months ago. We haven't violated any policies. We've been sitting quietly since takeoff. There's no legitimate reason for us to move." The confrontation was drawing attention now. Some first-class passengers were deliberately looking away, finding sudden interest in their screens or the clouds outside. Others watched with unconcealed curiosity. One middle-aged white woman a few rows ahead kept glancing back with evident discomfort, though whether at the situation or the sisters wasn't clear. "If you don't comply," Cynthia said, her voice hardening, "we'll have no choice but to have you removed from the flight for non-compliance with crew instructions." "Non-compliance?" Jasmine repeated, maintaining her composure despite the escalating situation. "We're simply asking for clarification on why we're being asked to leave seats we rightfully purchased. The safety and comfort of all passengers is our priority," Kevin recited, as if reading from a manual. "The captain has final authority over all seating arrangements." Maya continued recording as she asked, "And which passenger's comfort are you prioritizing right now?" "Because it seems like our comfort doesn't matter, despite paying for these specific seats." The implication hung in the air, unspoken but unmistakable. Around them, several white passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, but none spoke up. "This is your final warning," Cynthia stated. "Move to the seats we assign you, or we'll be forced to take further action." Jasmine and Maya exchanged glances. Years of conversations with their parents about navigating these situations raced through their minds. Make a scene and be labeled as angry black women. Comply and surrender their dignity along with the premium seats they had paid for. It was a no-win scenario they had been prepared for but had hoped to avoid. "We respectfully decline to move without a valid reason," Jasmine finally said, her voice steady. We've paid for these specific seats, we've violated no policies, and we have every right to remain here. Cynthia's lips pressed into a thin line as she turned to Kevin. Get the captain. Within minutes, the situation escalated beyond what either sister had anticipated. Captain William Peterson appeared in the cabin, accompanied by a stern-faced air marshal. The presence of law enforcement immediately changed the atmosphere in the first-class cabin from uncomfortable to tense. What seems to be the problem here? Captain Peterson asked, addressing his crew rather than the Washington sisters. These passengers are refusing to comply with crew instructions, Cynthia reported promptly. They've been disruptive and are now recording crew members against our request. Captain Peterson turned to the sisters, his assessment already complete before they could speak. Ladies, on an aircraft, crew instructions aren't optional. They're mandatory for everyone's safety. With all due respect, Captain, Jasmine began, her law classes from undergrad informing her response, we haven't received any safety-related instructions that we've ignored. We're simply being asked to give up seats we paid for without any valid explanation. The captain's expression remained unmoved. I don't have time to debate this. The decision has been made. You can move to the assigned seats in economy, or you can exit the aircraft. Those are your options. Maya continued recording, her hand trembling slightly but her resolve firm. We're being singled out. The only difference between us and everyone else in first class is obvious if you look around. The camera panned briefly across the first-class cabin, capturing the predominantly white faces, some now watching openly, others deliberately averting their eyes. Put that phone away, the air marshal ordered. Now. I'm documenting this incident for my own protection, Maya responded. I'm not interfering with anyone's duties. Captain Peterson made a dismissive gesture. I don't have time for this. You're delaying the flight for everyone. Either move to economy now, or we'll have you escorted off the plane entirely. The humiliation that followed would later be viewed by millions. The sisters were forced to gather their belongings under the watchful eyes of every passenger in first class. As they were escorted through the narrow aisle toward economy, whispers and stares followed them from both sides. This is wrong, a voice suddenly spoke up. A white woman in her 40s, seated in premium economy, addressed the flight attendants directly. Why are they being moved? They weren't causing any problems. Please stay out of this, ma'am, Kevin responded curtly. This is an internal matter. The woman, who they would later learn was Diane Foster, a university professor from Chicago, shook her head in visible disgust but was ignored as the procession continued. Maya maintained her recording despite repeated demands to stop, capturing their walk of shame through the entire length of the aircraft. They were eventually seated in economy, not even together but separated by several rows, given the full flight. Once seated, surrounded by curious and uncomfortable fellow passengers, Jasmine pulled out her phone and made the call that would change everything. Dad, she said quietly, after Harold Washington answered on the second ring. We have a situation on SkyNation Flight 2187 to Los Angeles. Her father's voice was calm but immediately alert. Tell me exactly what happened. Every detail. As Jasmine recounted the events precisely and factually, just as her father had taught her to do in any difficult situation, Harold Washington asked specific questions about flight numbers, employee names, and exact wording used. Though the sisters didn't know it yet, their father was simultaneously pulling up information on his computer while on the phone. Stay where you are, Harold instructed after getting the full picture. Don't escalate, don't argue further. I'll handle this from here. The sisters remained in their assigned economy seats as the minutes ticked by. The flight, which should have been well on its way to Los Angeles by now, remained parked at the gate. The captain's voice came over the intercom announcing a brief technical delay, but offered no further explanation. 15 minutes passed. Then 30. Passengers began to shift restlessly in their seats, checking watches and flight trackers on their phones. The cabin grew warm as the air conditioning operated at reduced power while they remained at the gate. Just as murmurs of discontent began to rise from all sections of the aircraft, both sisters received a text message from their father: "Stay calm. Don't move." As the Washington sisters sat separated in economy class, the rest of the passengers grew increasingly restless. The plane had now been delayed on the tarmac for over an hour with only vague announcements about operational issues from the cockpit. What does it feel like to have your dignity stripped away in public? Have you ever been in a situation where you were powerless one moment, and then everything changed the next? Type 1 in the comments if you've ever been discriminated against and wished you had the power to fight back. Hit that like button if you believe everyone deserves to be treated with respect regardless of their appearance. And subscribe to see more stories of justice being served in unexpected ways. But what was happening behind the scenes while the sisters waited? Let's take a look at who Harold Washington really was, and why that simple phone call sent shockwaves through SkyNation Airlines. Harold Washington hadn't always been a man of influence. Born to a janitor father and nurse mother in Baltimore, he had watched his parents work multiple jobs to provide opportunities for him and his siblings. Through scholarships and part-time jobs, Harold had put himself through college and then law school, eventually specializing in aviation law. His expertise had made him invaluable to airlines navigating the complex regulatory environment of international air travel. What many didn't know was that Harold had made strategic investments over the years, particularly in airlines with histories of discrimination complaints. Not because he supported their practices, but because he understood that ownership gave him leverage to force change from within. SkyNation's parent company, Global Air Holdings, had been one of his earliest and largest investments. While he remained a silent partner in public, within the boardroom, Harold Washington's name carried significant weight. He owned nearly 12% of the company's shares, making him one of its largest individual shareholders. For Jasmine and Maya, growing up as the daughters of Harold and Diana Washington meant a life of privilege that their parents had never known. Private schools, international travel, summer programs at prestigious universities. They had advantages their parents had fought to provide. But along with privilege came responsibility and important lessons. You'll have to be twice as good to get half as far, their mother had told them from an early age. And when you face discrimination, not if, but when, you need to be strategic about how you respond. Their father had added another layer to that wisdom: document everything. Know your rights. And understand that sometimes the most powerful response isn't an immediate reaction, but a calculated move when they least expect it. Those lessons were playing out now as the sisters sat quietly in their economy seats, following their father's instruction to wait. Meanwhile, in his Atlanta office, Harold Washington was executing a carefully orchestrated response. His first call had been to Frank Bennett, CEO of SkyNation Airlines, whom he had met at several industry events. "Frank, Harold Washington here. We have a situation involving my daughters on your Boston to LA flight." The CEO had initially responded with the practiced concern of an executive accustomed to handling VIP complaints. "I'm sorry to hear that, Harold. I'm sure we can sort this out. I don't think you understand, Frank. My daughters were removed from first-class seats they paid for, publicly humiliated, and separated, all without cause. And they recorded the entire incident." There was a pause on the line before Frank asked, "Your daughters are the young women on flight 2187? "Yes. And as you know, I own a significant portion of your airline's parent company. So here's what's going to happen: that plane isn't taking off until my daughters are back in their rightful seats, with a public apology. And we're going to have a much longer conversation about the culture at SkyNation that allowed this to happen." Back on the aircraft, the mood was growing tense. Children were becoming cranky, business travelers were checking watches with increasing frequency, and the cabin temperature continued to rise. Flight attendants moved through the aisles offering water but no explanations. Cynthia and Kevin could be seen huddled near the galley, checking their phones with increasing frequency and speaking in urgent whispers. Captain Peterson had emerged from the cockpit twice for hushed conversations with the lead flight attendant, his expression growing more concerned each time. "This is SkyNation Operations," came a new announcement. "We apologize for the continued delay. We're currently awaiting the arrival of airline representatives to address a situation on board. We expect to have this resolved within the next 30 minutes. The announcement triggered a wave of groans throughout the cabin. A businessman shouted, "What situation? We've been sitting here for over an hour." Maya used the distraction to text her sister, "Something big is happening. Dad must have pulled some strings." Jasmine replied, "Stay calm. Whatever happens next, let's handle it with dignity." What neither sister fully realized was that their father hadn't just pulled strings, he had set in motion a seismic shift that would reshape an entire airline. Harold Washington wasn't just calling in a favor for his daughters, he was addressing a systemic issue that affected countless passengers who didn't have his influence. As they waited, Maya discreetly uploaded segments of her recording to her private cloud storage, ensuring the evidence would remain intact regardless of what happened to her phone. Jasmine reviewed airline regulations on her phone, preparing for whatever came next. Another 30 minutes passed before the main cabin door reopened. The passengers, now nearly 2 hours delayed, watched as 3 individuals in business attire boarded the aircraft. Their SkyNation executive badges indicated they were not ordinary airline staff. The standoff was about to end, but the story was just beginning. 2 hours and 17 minutes after the scheduled departure time, the atmosphere on Flight 2187 transformed with the arrival of the SkyNation executives. Leading the group was Thomas Freeman, the airline's vice president of operations, a tall man with silver hair and an expression of grave concern. Freeman spoke briefly with Captain Peterson before taking the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Thomas Freeman, SkyNation's VP of Operations. I sincerely apologize for the significant delay you've experienced today. We've had a situation that required immediate attention, and we're here to resolve it so we can get you on your way to Los Angeles as quickly as possible." Whispers rippled through the cabin as passengers speculated about the nature of the situation. Most had no idea it involved the 2 young black women seated separately in economy. Freeman, accompanied by the other executives, made his way directly to Maya's seat. Passengers watched curiously as he leaned down to speak with her. "Ms. Washington, I want to personally apologize for the treatment you and your sister received today. It was unacceptable and doesn't reflect the values of SkyNation Airlines. We'd like to escort you both back to your original first-class seats immediately." Maya, maintaining her composure despite the sudden reversal, simply nodded and gathered her belongings. Heads turned as she walked forward to where another executive was already speaking with Jasmine. As the sisters were escorted back to first class, Freeman addressed the cabin again, "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be making some adjustments to the seating arrangements to correct an error that was made earlier. We appreciate your continued patience." The adjustments became immediately clear. Bradley and Karen Mitchell, the couple who had complained about the Washington sisters, were being asked to collect their belongings. Their expressions shifted from confusion to indignation as they realized they were being moved from first class. "This is outrageous." Bradley Mitchell protested loudly. "We paid for these seats." "Sir, we'll be fully refunding your first-class fare," one of the executives explained quietly. "But in light of recent events, we believe it's in everyone's best interest to make this change." "What events?" "Because we complained about disruptive passengers." Karen Mitchell's voice carried through the cabin. Freeman stepped in, his voice low but firm. "Mrs. Mitchell, we have reviewed the situation and found no evidence of disruptive behavior from the Washington sisters. What we did find were complaints based on unfounded assumptions that appear to have been motivated by bias." The implication was clear, and several nearby passengers who had witnessed the earlier confrontation shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The Mitchells had no choice but to gather their belongings and move to the Economy Plus seats that had been offered to the sisters earlier. Meanwhile, Jasmine and Maya were settling back into their original first-class seats, now treated with exaggerated courtesy by the remaining flight attendants. Cynthia and Kevin were nowhere to be seen, having been removed from the flight alongside the Mitchells. As new flight attendants rushed to offer them premium headphones, extra pillows, and complimentary cocktails, Jasmine leaned over to her sister. "Dad didn't just make a call. He dropped a bomb. Maya nodded, checking her phone to find that her video, which she had posted to her private social media just before boarding, had somehow found its way to public platforms. The clip showing their removal from first class had already been viewed over 50,000 times and was climbing rapidly. The hashtag #FlyingWhileBlack was trending alongside hashtag SkyNationShame. "It's going viral," she whispered to Jasmine, showing her the rapidly climbing view count. Across the aisle, Diane Foster, the woman who had spoken up in their defense earlier, had been moved up to first class as well. She leaned over with a smile. "Justice looks good on you too. I'm glad someone had the power to make it happen." Her words carried both support and an uncomfortable truth. Justice had come swiftly for the Washington sisters because of who their father was. What about the countless others who faced similar discrimination without powerful connections? As the plane finally pushed back from the gate, nearly 3 hours behind schedule, passengers throughout the cabin were checking their phones, many watching the viral video and making the connection to the situation that had delayed their flight. Whispers and glances toward the Washington sisters continued, but now with a different quality: curiosity, respect, and in some cases, embarrassment for having witnessed their mistreatment without speaking up. Maya, with her technical expertise, was monitoring the spread of her video across platforms. "It's being picked up by major accounts," she told Jasmine quietly. "People are sharing their own stories in the comments. This is becoming much bigger than just us." Indeed, within the hours they spent in the air, the video triggered an outpouring of similar accounts from black passengers who had experienced discrimination while flying. Some had been questioned about their first-class tickets, others had been accused of being in the wrong seats despite having proper boarding passes, and many shared stories of receiving substandard service compared to white passengers. By the time Flight 2187 was halfway to Los Angeles, #FlyingWhileBlack had become a full-fledged movement online. Maya's computer science background gave her unique insight into how the algorithm was pushing the story to wider audiences. Each hour, the view count doubled. For SkyNation Airlines, the public relations nightmare was just beginning. The company's social media team was overwhelmed with comments, their stock had begun to drop in pre-market trading, and news outlets were picking up the story for their evening broadcasts. The Washington sisters had arrived at the airport that morning as two young professionals headed for job interviews. By the time they landed, they would be the catalysts for a national conversation about race, privilege, and accountability in the airline industry. When Flight 2187 finally touched down at Los Angeles International Airport, 6 hours behind schedule, the Washington sisters were surprised to see flashing cameras waiting on the jetway. In the time they had been airborne, their story had exploded beyond social media and into mainstream news coverage. "Ms. Washington, can you tell us what happened on the flight today?" a reporter called out as Jasmine and Maya emerged from the jet bridge. "Were you targeted because of your race?" shouted another. "Is it true your father is Harold Washington, the aviation attorney?" The sisters exchanged glances, drawing on years of their parents' coaching about handling public attention. With a poised smile that revealed nothing of the turbulence they'd experienced, Jasmine addressed the gathered press. "My sister and I experienced something today that unfortunately happens to many black travelers. We're grateful that SkyNation took steps to address the situation, but we believe this conversation needs to continue beyond our individual experience." Maya added, "We've seen thousands of comments from people sharing similar stories since our video went online. This isn't about us, it's about a pattern that needs to change." Their measured response, neither emotional nor accusatory despite their ordeal, reflected the careful balance they had learned to maintain as young black women in professional spaces. Even in this moment, they couldn't afford to appear angry or aggressive, knowing how easily those labels could be applied to discredit them. As they navigated through the terminal, their phones buzzed constantly with notifications. Maya's original video had now been viewed over 2 million times. News outlets from CNN to the Washington Post were requesting interviews. And amidst it all, text messages from their father provided guidance, "Proud of how you're handling this. Stay on message. This isn't about revenge, it's about accountability and change." The sisters' experience had struck a chord precisely because it highlighted how discrimination could affect even those with privilege. If two well-educated, well-spoken young women from an influential family could be treated this way, what happened to those without such advantages? Despite the chaos unfolding around their story, Jasmine and Maya kept their focus on the reason for their trip. They took turns using their hotel room to prepare and attend their scheduled interviews, maintaining their professional commitments even as their phones continued to explode with notifications. During her interview with a major tech company, Maya was asked about the trending hashtag bearing her name. "I noticed you've been in the news today," the interviewer said carefully. "That must be quite distracting." Maya met his gaze directly. "It's brought unexpected attention to an important issue. But if you're concerned about my ability to focus amidst challenges, I think today demonstrates that I can stay composed and meet my commitments even under extraordinary circumstances." The interviewer had nodded, impressed by her composure. Meanwhile, across town, Sky Nation's stock was in freefall. By midday, shares had dropped 18% as investors reacted to the viral story and the flood of similar accounts now emerging from other passengers. The hashtag #FlyingWhileBlack had evolved into hashtag Boycott Sky Nation, with influential celebrities and public figures joining the conversation. The Washington sisters had experienced discrimination throughout their lives, despite their family's status. There was the time a store security guard had followed teenage Jasmine through a high-end boutique, ignoring her white friends. Or when Maya's advanced coding project had been questioned as plagiarism by a professor who couldn't believe a black freshman had created such sophisticated work. Their parents' wealth and influence had provided some insulation but never immunity from racism. What made this incident different was the irrefutable video evidence and the platform they had to share it. As the daughters of Harold Washington, they had resources most victims of discrimination did not, including a father with the power to ground an entire flight and force a corporate reckoning. By evening, Harold Washington had made his move. In a press statement that sent shockwaves through the airline industry, he revealed his substantial ownership stake in Sky Nation's parent company and announced his intention to use his position to address what he called a culture of unchecked bias within the airline. "Today it was my daughters. Tomorrow it could be anyone's children, parents, or grandparents facing humiliation for simply existing in spaces they have every right to occupy," his statement read. "As both a father and a significant shareholder, I cannot and will not allow this culture to persist." The revelation of Washington's ownership position transformed the story from a viral moment to a corporate governance earthquake. Business news channels ran special segments analyzing the impact on Sky Nation and the broader implications for corporate America when diversity issues affected stock value. Online, internet sleuths had identified the Mitchells, whose faces were visible in Maya's video. Their business, a chain of luxury spas in New England, was flooded with negative reviews as people connected them to the incident. Their social media accounts were set to private as comments poured in condemning their behavior. As night fell in Los Angeles, the sisters finally had a moment to process the day's events. Sitting in their hotel room with room service dinner, they watched news coverage of their own story with a surreal sense of detachment. "Did you ever think we'd become a national news story when we woke up this morning?" Maya asked, still scrolling through the thousands of comments on her video. "Honestly? No," Jasmine replied. "But I'm not surprised it resonated with so many people. This happens every day to folks who don't have the privilege of a father who can make an airline listen." That uncomfortable truth hung between them. Their victory had come through privilege, not racial privilege, but the privilege of wealth and connections. For every Washington sister who could call a powerful father, there were thousands of black travelers who had no recourse when faced with similar discrimination. "We need to use this," Maya said suddenly, looking up from her phone. "This attention, this platform, we need to make it about more than just us." Jasmine nodded slowly. "Dad always says leverage only matters if you use it for something meaningful." As they began to sketch out ideas for how to transform their viral moment into meaningful change, their father called to let them know he was on his way to Los Angeles. The conversation about accountability was just beginning. 3 days after the incident, Harold Washington arrived in Los Angeles, bringing with him the gravitas of both a concerned father and a major shareholder. The sisters had completed their job interviews, all successful despite or perhaps partly because of their new public profile, and now joined their father for what would become a pivotal meeting in Sky Nation's corporate history. The presidential suite at the Beverly Wilshire Hotel had been transformed into an impromptu conference room. Sky Nation CEO Frank Bennett had flown in personally, along with the company's chief legal counsel and head of public relations. The airline executives sat on one side of the massive dining table that now served as a negotiation table. The Washington family occupied the other side, with Harold in the center, flanked by his daughters. "I want to begin by apologizing again to Jasmine and Maya," Frank Bennett started, his practiced corporate sincerity on full display. "What happened on that flight does not reflect the values of Sky Nation Airlines." Harold Washington leaned forward slightly. "With all due respect, Frank, when something happens repeatedly within your organization, it absolutely reflects your values, or at least the values you're willing to tolerate." The CEO shifted uncomfortably. "We've already taken immediate action. The flight attendants involved have been suspended pending investigation, and we've issued a public statement condemning their behavior." "Suspending a few employees treats the symptom, not the disease," Harold replied. "My daughters aren't here for a personal apology or to see scapegoats created. They're here because what happened to them happens to black passengers every day on your airline and others." Maya opened her laptop, turning the screen toward the executives. "Since posting my video, I've received over 8,000 messages from black travelers sharing similar experiences on Sky Nation flights alone. This isn't an isolated incident with a few bad employees, it's a systemic problem." The head of public relations, a woman named Patricia Winters, interjected. "We're prepared to offer a significant settlement to put this matter behind us. We value your family's privacy and understand you wouldn't want this situation to continue drawing attention." Jasmine, drawing on her business training, responded firmly. "Ms. Winters, I think you misunderstand our position. We're not interested in being silenced with a settlement. We're interested in creating lasting change within Sky Nation." Frank Bennett's expression hardened slightly. "While we appreciate your concern, the operational decisions of the airline are ultimately the purview of management, not shareholders." Harold Washington smiled thinly. "Under normal circumstances, you'd be correct. But these aren't normal circumstances. As you're well aware, your stock has dropped 22% since this incident went viral. The hashtag boycott Sky Nation is still trending 3 days later. You've had to cancel 38 flights due to crew calling in sick after facing public backlash from this incident." He placed a folder on the table and slid it toward Bennett. "Inside you'll find the agenda for the emergency board meeting I've called for next week, where we'll be discussing a vote of no confidence in the current leadership if significant changes aren't implemented immediately." The atmosphere in the room shifted palpably. What had begun as a negotiation to manage a PR crisis was now clearly a fight for corporate survival. Bennett opened the folder, scanning its contents with growing concern. "This is extreme, Harold. We can work this out without involving the board." "I believe we can," Harold agreed. "But that depends on your willingness to implement real change, not just damage control." What followed was a 3-hour negotiation that would reshape Sky Nation Airlines from the inside out. The Washington sisters weren't passive participants, they were active architects of the proposed reforms. Maya, with her background in computer science, proposed a comprehensive digital system for tracking discrimination complaints and identifying patterns among staff or at particular airports. "The problem with discrimination is that each incident is treated in isolation," she explained. "This system would aggregate data to reveal systemic issues that might otherwise go unnoticed." Jasmine leveraged her business background to outline a complete overhaul of staff training programs. "Your current diversity training is a 2-hour online module that employees click through without engagement. We need comprehensive, ongoing education with real accountability metrics." As the discussion continued, Harold added his most significant demand. I want 2 board seats dedicated to diversity oversight, with one going to an independent civil rights attorney and the other to a diversity expert with experience in corporate transformation. Bennett balked at this last demand. Board composition isn't something we can change overnight. There are shareholder votes, regulatory filings, all of which can be expedited when necessary, Harold countered. You have 2 directors up for renewal next month. They can step down to create these positions. The negotiations continued well into the evening, with proposals and counter-proposals flying across the table. The Washington family remained united and unwavering in their core demands, while the Sky Nation executives gradually came to terms with the reality of their situation. By 10 p.m., an agreement in principle had been reached. Sky Nation would implement the Washington family's proposed reforms, including the revolutionary tracking system Maya had outlined, the comprehensive training program Jasmine had designed, and the board seats Harold had demanded. In return, the Washingtons would issue a joint statement with Sky Nation announcing these changes as a collaborative effort to transform the airline industry, shifting the narrative from crisis to innovation. Harold would also commit to maintaining his ownership stake for at least 3 years, providing stability to the company's stock. As the executives gathered their materials to leave, Bennett paused at the door. You could have destroyed us, Harold. Why work with us instead? Harold glanced at his daughters before responding. Because destruction is easy. Transformation is harder but infinitely more valuable. My daughters didn't want revenge, they wanted change. And now they'll get to help create it. After the executives departed, the Washington family remained in the suite, processing the magnitude of what they had accomplished. I still can't believe we went from being kicked out of our seats to redesigning an airline's entire approach to diversity in 3 days, Maya marveled. This is just the beginning, Harold cautioned. Getting commitments on paper is one thing. Ensuring they're implemented is another battle entirely. Jasmine nodded thoughtfully. But we'll be watching every step of the way. And so will millions of others now. The power of their position wasn't lost on any of them. They had leveraged privilege to fight discrimination, using the very systems that often perpetuated inequality to begin dismantling it from within. It was a complex victory, both satisfying and sobering in its implications. As Harold hugged his daughters goodnight, he summed up the bittersweet reality. I'm incredibly proud of how you've handled this situation. But I'm even more sorry that despite all your mother and I have accomplished, you still had to experience what happened on that plane. At least we were in a position to do something about it, Maya replied softly. Most people aren't. That truth would guide their actions in the months to come. 2 weeks after the confrontation on Flight 2187, Sky Nation Airlines held a press conference that made headlines across the country. With the Washington family present, CEO Frank Bennett announced what he called the most comprehensive anti-discrimination initiative in aviation history. The cameras flashed as Bennett outlined the sweeping changes coming to Sky Nation, a new bias incident reporting system developed with input from Maya Washington. Mandatory quarterly in-person diversity training for all customer-facing staff, the creation of a passenger advocacy office to investigate complaints, and the appointment of 2 new board members focused exclusively on diversity and inclusion oversight. Today marks not the end of a controversy, but the beginning of a transformation, Bennett stated, the carefully crafted words reflecting hours of negotiation with the Washington family's representatives. Sky Nation is committed to becoming the industry leader in equitable treatment for all passengers. What wasn't mentioned publicly, but had been confirmed through internal channels, was the termination of flight attendants Cynthia Thompson and Kevin Rodriguez, along with Captain William Peterson. The internal investigation had revealed a pattern of discriminatory behavior in their personnel files that had previously gone unaddressed. For the Washington sisters, the press conference represented a victory, but one that came with complex emotions. As they stood for photographs with Bennett and other executives, they were acutely aware of the contradiction inherent in their situation. It had taken their privileged position and their father's influence to create change that should have happened long ago. The aftermath brought unexpected developments for all involved. The Mitchells, whose identities had been discovered online, faced severe backlash. Their chain of luxury spas lost several corporate accounts, and Bradley Mitchell was asked to step down from 2 nonprofit boards. Their attempt to release a statement claiming they had been misrepresented only fueled further criticism when they referred to the incident as a misunderstanding, rather than acknowledging any wrongdoing. Diane Foster, the passenger who had spoken up in defense of the Washington sisters, became an unlikely ally in the reform efforts. A sociology professor specializing in racial dynamics in public spaces, she was invited by Harold Washington to consult on Sky Nation's new training programs, bringing academic rigor to the practical implementation of the airline's commitments. Most surprisingly, Harold Washington received an unexpected call from executives at 3 other major airlines, all suddenly eager to discuss their own diversity initiatives before they faced similar public relations disasters. The ripple effects were spreading throughout the industry. For Maya and Jasmine, life had changed in ways they hadn't anticipated. Both had received job offers from their interviews in Los Angeles, but their career trajectories were taking unexpected turns. Maya was approached by Sky Nation's technology division to lead the development of her proposed bias reporting system, which the airline hoped to eventually license to other carriers. The role offered her the chance to create technology with direct social impact, something she had always hoped to achieve in her career. "They're offering me triple what the tech firms in LA proposed," she told Jasmine over lunch at their favorite restaurant back in Boston. "But it feels strange to work for a company that discriminated against us, even if we're changing it from within." Jasmine understood the dilemma. She had received her own offer from Sky Nation's corporate strategy team, specifically to consult on their cultural transformation initiative. "I keep thinking about what Dad always says about change," Jasmine mused. "Sometimes you have to be in the room where decisions are made." Both sisters ultimately accepted the offers, with contracts that guaranteed their independence and direct reporting lines to the newly formed Diversity Board Committee. Their decision wasn't without criticism. Some online commentators accused them of selling out or being co-opted by corporate interests. Others praised them for using their leverage to create institutional change. 6 weeks after the incident, Maya's reporting system went live across Sky Nation's entire operation. Flight attendants were required to log every passenger interaction that involved seating changes, upgrades, downgrades, or conflict. The system automatically flagged patterns that might indicate bias, whether conscious or unconscious. Within the first month, the data revealed uncomfortable truths. Black passengers were 6 times more likely to be questioned about their seating assignments than white passengers. Women flying alone in first class were twice as likely to be asked if they were in the correct seat. Middle Eastern passengers faced more random security checks than any other demographic. The numbers couldn't be dismissed as anecdotal or coincidental. They provided irrefutable evidence of the systemic nature of the problem, evidence that Sky Nation was now contractually obligated to address. Jasmine's work focused on transforming the corporate culture that had allowed such disparities to develop and persist. Her training programs didn't simply lecture employees about unconscious bias, they created scenarios based on real incidents and required staff to practice appropriate responses. Performance reviews now included metrics on equitable treatment, and advancement within the company was tied partially to these scores. During one of these training sessions, Jasmine met Sharon Davis, a black flight attendant who had worked for Sky Nation for 15 years. After the session, Sharon approached her privately. "I just wanted to thank you," Sharon said, her voice quiet but emotional. "For 15 years, I've watched what happened to you happen to other passengers. I've reported it, I've spoken up, but nothing ever changed. I was even written up once for causing discord when I challenged a colleague's treatment of a black family." Sharon went on to explain that since the new policies had been implemented, she had been promoted to a training position she had been denied 3 times previously. "This isn't just about passengers," she told Jasmine. "It's changing things for employees like me too." Conversations like this helped the Washington sisters navigate the complicated emotions that came with their new roles. They were using their privilege to create space for others who hadn't had their advantages or platform, which felt meaningful. Yet they remained aware that the same systems they were now working to reform had caused harm to countless people who would never receive the justice or recognition they deserved. As other airlines began implementing similar programs, Many in direct response to Sky Nation's initiative and the continued public pressure for industry-wide reform, the conversation expanded beyond a single incident or company. The hashtag #FlyingWhileBlack evolved into a movement for accountability across the travel industry, with hotels, car rental companies, and cruise lines all facing increased scrutiny of their practices. 3 months after the incident on Flight 2187, Harold Washington stood before the newly constituted Sky Nation Board of Directors, which now included civil rights attorney James Barlow and corporate diversity expert Dr. Aisha Robinson in the seats he had negotiated. "We've made significant progress," Harold acknowledged in his address. "But true transformation isn't measured in press releases or policy documents. It's measured in the daily experience of every passenger and employee, regardless of their race, gender, religion, or background." The board meeting that day approved funding for the next phase of the Washington initiatives, expanding the reporting system and training programs to Sky Nation's international operations. What had begun as a humiliating experience for 2 young women was now driving global corporate policy affecting thousands of employees and millions of passengers. For Jasmine and Maya Washington, the journey had transformed them as well. They had gone from victims of discrimination to architects of systemic change, using the very privilege that had protected them to create protections for others. It wasn't a perfect solution to the complex problem of racial bias, but it was a meaningful step forward in an industry that had long resisted accountability. As Maya told a group of computer science students she was mentoring, "Sometimes justice isn't about getting everything right immediately. It's about refusing to accept that things can't change, and then using whatever tools you have to push that change forward." 6 months after that fateful flight from Boston to Los Angeles, Jasmine and Maya Washington stood in the gleaming atrium of Sky Nation's newly renovated corporate headquarters in Atlanta. Around them, airline executives mingled with civil rights leaders, tech innovators, and media representatives at the official launch of the Sky Nation Equity Initiative, the comprehensive program born from their ordeal. The sisters, now key architects of the airline's transformation, exchanged proud glances as Frank Bennett took the podium to address the gathered crowd. 6 months ago, Sky Nation faced a moment of truth, the CEO began, his tone notably more authentic than the corporate speak he had initially offered the Washington family. "We could have treated the incident involving Jasmine and Maya Washington as a PR problem to manage. Instead, thanks to their courage and the leadership of their father, Harold Washington, we chose to recognize it as a wake-up call to transform our entire organization." The changes were visible throughout the company. The executive team, previously almost entirely white and male, now included several women and people of color in key positions. The board of directors had been expanded to include the diversity-focused seats Harold had demanded. Most importantly, the data from Maya's revolutionary reporting system showed measurable improvement in equitable treatment across all passenger demographics. After the formal presentation, as attendees browsed interactive displays showcasing the initiative's various components, a young black woman in a Sky Nation flight attendant uniform approached the Washington sisters. "Excuse me," she said, her voice betraying a slight nervousness. "I'm Tanya Jackson. I just wanted to thank you both personally. I was hired 3 months ago as part of the expanded diversity recruitment program. Before this, I'd applied to 4 different airlines and never made it past the first interview." As Tanya shared her story, the sisters learned she was a single mother who had put herself through flight attendant training while working 2 jobs. The position at Sky Nation had transformed her financial situation and career prospects. "What you did didn't just help passengers," Tanya told them. "You've created opportunities for people like me who might never have gotten a fair chance otherwise." Moments like these helped balance the complicated feelings both sisters still carried about their roles within the corporation. They were insiders now, with the influence and salaries that came with executive positions, yet they remained vigilant about maintaining their independence and perspective. Harold Washington joined his daughters as the event wound down, his pride evident as he observed what they had helped create. "When I taught you two about standing up for yourselves, I never imagined it would lead to all this," he said, gesturing around the room. "You've taken what happened to you and turned it into something that will help thousands of others." "We had advantages most don't," Jasmine acknowledged. Your influence opened doors that would have remained shut for others facing the same discrimination. Harold nodded thoughtfully. That's true. And that's why what you've built here matters so much. You've created systems that don't require a powerful parent or viral video to deliver justice. The data supported his assessment. In the past 3 months alone, Maya's reporting system had identified and addressed 67 potential bias incidents before they escalated to the level of what the sisters had experienced. Flight attendants were receiving real-time feedback on their interaction patterns, often revealing unconscious biases they hadn't recognized in themselves. The Passenger Advocacy Office had successfully resolved hundreds of complaints that previously might have been dismissed or ignored. SkyNation's transformation had also forced a reckoning throughout the industry. 2 other major carriers had implemented similar reporting systems, and a congressional committee was now considering legislation to require bias tracking across all U.S. airlines. What began as a humiliating moment for 2 young women had catalyzed a movement for accountability that continued to gain momentum. As the event concluded, the sisters prepared to board a SkyNation flight to Boston, where they would be splitting their time between the airline's headquarters and remote work from their home city. At the gate, they were greeted by name by the ground crew. Not because of special treatment, but because the airline's new protocols emphasized personal service for all passengers regardless of race or status. Their first-class boarding passes weren't checked multiple times or questioned. The flight attendants welcomed them aboard with the same courtesy extended to every passenger. Settling into their seats, Maya pulled out her phone to check the latest data from the reporting system. We're seeing a 92% reduction in bias-related complaints since implementation, she noted. And employee satisfaction scores are up across all demographics. Jasmine smiled. Numbers don't lie. But I'm more impressed by the stories behind them, people like Tanya who now have opportunities they deserved all along. As the plane prepared for takeoff, the sisters reflected on how far they had come from that moment 6 months ago when they were humiliated and removed from their rightful seats. They had transformed a personal injustice into institutional change, using their privilege to create systems that would protect those without such advantages. It wasn't a perfect solution to the deep-rooted problem of racial bias in America. No corporate initiative could erase centuries of discrimination or guarantee equality in every interaction. But it was a meaningful step forward, proof that accountability was possible and that systems could be reformed when enough pressure was applied at the right points. The plane lifted off smoothly, carrying the Washington sisters back to Boston. Below them stretched a country still wrestling with its racial history and present, still unequal in countless ways. But they had shown that change was possible, that speaking up mattered, and that justice, while imperfect, could be advanced through strategic action and unwavering determination. As the seatbelt sign turned off, Jasmine turned to her sister. Dad always taught us that privilege comes with responsibility. I think we're finally understanding what that really means. Maya nodded, looking out at the clouds below. It means recognizing that our victory isn't complete until everyone has the same protection we fought for. That understanding would guide them in the work that still lay ahead, not just at SkyNation, but in all the spaces where inequality persisted. Their journey had begun with a humiliating removal from first class, but it would continue as a lifelong commitment to ensuring everyone could claim their rightful seat at the table. This story teaches us that justice often requires both privilege and determination to achieve. While the Washington sisters had the advantage of a powerful father, they used that privilege to create systemic change benefiting thousands who lacked similar connections. True leadership means transforming personal injustice into collective progress. The most effective response to discrimination isn't always immediate confrontation, but strategic action that addresses root causes. By documenting their experience and leveraging their positions thoughtfully, the sisters created accountability mechanisms that outlasted their individual case. We learned that corporate change is possible when the right pressure points are identified. Money and influence speak loudly in boardrooms, but lasting transformation requires embedding new values into systems and structures. The sisters understood that firing a few employees wouldn't solve the problem. Only reimagining the entire approach could prevent future incidents. Perhaps most importantly, This story reminds us that our responsibility doesn't end when we achieve personal justice. The measure of our character lies in how we use our victories to create pathways for others, especially those without our advantages. Real change happens when we recognize that none of us are truly free until all of us are treated with dignity and respect. Have you ever witnessed discrimination and wished you could do something about it? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story inspired you to stand up against injustice, hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful stories of courage and change. Remember to share this video with someone who needs encouragement to speak up when they witness unfairness. Together, we can build a world where everyone is treated with dignity regardless of their appearance or background. Thank you for listening, and remember, your actions today create the world we'll all live in tomorrow.